Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to talk about Supergirl, its 6th season, the series finale, and whether it provided a worthy conclusion for the character of Kara Danvers. Now there will be spoilers within this video, so just be warned if you haven't yet caught up with all of the episodes throughout season 6 or indeed the season finale. Now as we all know, Supergirl season 6 is indeed the final season of the long running series, which debuted way back in 2015 on the CBS network. It has proven to be an integral part of the CW Arrowverse and has had a very successful run of over 126 episodes. Now you can catch up with previous reviews of the show in terms of season 6 and also season 5 on the channel, and I will leave the links within the description. So then, when we talk about season 6, did it overall provide an epic and satisfying final conclusion to the show and the character of Supergirl herself? Now sadly, I'm going to have to say no on this, and I think this season has been very disappointing and might actually be the worst of the entire series. When I previously talked about season 5, I stated that it had very interesting ideas, but it didn't really develop or execute them very well. In terms of that season, it concentrated on the threats of the Leviathan throughout the entire season, where we were dealing very much more with virtual technology. We saw the emergence of Lex again throughout the entire season. We saw the departure of Jimmy Olsen, and we centered on very much Lena going on a very dark path when she discovered Kara's identity and she felt betrayal, and we had to go through the various story of them being at various odds with one another. So there was at least something to hold on to within season 5, but when we look at season 6, it didn't even have any really compelling ideas or themes or story arcs throughout the entire run. And to be honest with you, it was very much of a struggle to try and stay maintained and engaged throughout the entire show, because there was nothing really interesting about it. Now when we talk about season 6, the main story arc centered on Supergirl being trapped in the Phantom Zone, following it with an encounter with Lex. This was indeed the season premiere story, and she really stayed in the Phantom Zone for around about 7 to 8 episodes, and I think this was to account for the fact that obviously due to the COVID pandemic, the final stages of season 5 had to be cut short, just like with the other CW shows, and also I believe this was around the same time that Melissa was pregnant, so they had to account for her being absent from the show overall. She came back from the Phantom Zone in around the 8th episode, I believe, and during the time there she encountered the 5th dimensional being known as Nxly, who had gone to become the main antagonist throughout the entire season. Now we got some very hokey conflict throughout the season, involving certain totems when they stood for certain emotions such as courage and hope and love. And the final battle really was the various groups of Team Supergirl and Nxly trying to attain all of these totems. We had some certain side stories involving Nya contacting her sister and really getting to grips with her overall existence. We had another very strange turn involving Lena when she discovered her real birth mother, and this resulted in her gaining witch powers. We see Alex and Kelly's relationship continue, where they look to adopt a young daughter, and eventually we see them getting married in the season finale. And we also centered around Kelly's role adopting the Guardian identity that we saw was taken over by Jimmy in season 5, of course, and what was really a very heavy-handed arc which involved her being in touch with more the poorer civilians throughout the city, calling out of the main heroes who at the time were trying to stop Nxly, and Kelly felt that we were ignoring the more real civilians within the city. And to be honest, I was never convinced by the Guardian identity at all, whether it was adopted by Jimmy or Kelly, because when you have a team of people with superpowers or super abilities, just to have somebody who's basically a street level fighter, it just really didn't ring true as to their overall importance within the team. And the episode itself where we see Kelly turn into Guardian was really heavy-handed. We also saw the return of John Crye's Lex Luthor once again in the latter stages of this season. They tried to build some sort of love connection between him and Nxly. Again, it was very unconvincing itself, never really rang true. Now when we talk about the finale episodes itself, the show had a 2-hour premiere. The last 2 episodes were, I believe, called The Last Gauntlet. That was episode 19, and Kara was titled episode 20. And the finale itself was very messy. We had this huge assortment of character deaths, big battles, certain changes of decisions, the totems themselves constantly changing hands. We kind of had a huge battle royale dynamic where we saw villains from the previous seasons and also from the crossovers, where we saw the likes of Metallo, Red Tornado, Overgirl. We had various heroes coming back, so we saw the likes of Monel coming back, Jimmy returned as Guardian, we saw Win as well making a return as well. And it just seemed that they were really throwing all of these elements together, so it was epic in terms of its overall construct. It didn't really feel epic in terms of its overall nature. So in the end, we had all of these big massive explosions and laser beams, energy waves, but it didn't really carry much weight. In the end, we saw basically that Nxly and Lex are defeated very easily, so it really wrapped everything up very quickly. So the first episode for me was very nonsensical for the most part, and had me worried that they weren't really going to deliver any kind of worthy conclusion to the overall show. Now, having said that, once we get past the big battle and we settle down and we catch up with all the other characters, what they've been up to, this of course resulted in the overall wedding between Kelly and Alex. And yes, it kind of brought it together much more in this overall arc here. It was nicely done, and we gave each character their own time to explain where they had come from, what they were doing overall. And we did have some very sweet-natured, emotional moments between all of the characters that we saw. And this is kind of the way it should be done in terms of a season or a series finale. There should be some sort of cyclical narrative where we focus on very much of the OG characters, bring them back together for a final farewell and reunion. And in this regard, the finale did itself very good. Amongst these, we saw the return of Callista Flockhart as Cat Grant. She was very much a prominent favourite throughout both Season 1 and Season 2. And these were good scenes when she's calling Kara, and essentially she's brought back Catco, and she wants Kara to be the editor-in-chief. Now, obviously, they couldn't have Callista actually interact with Kara, and we got some few very dodgy green screen moments when she's standing on the beach, but I didn't mind that too much. It was just good to get her back in the show, and again, having her having those final moments with Kara was very good. We saw Brainy coming back from the future to reunite with Nya again. Kind of contradictory, because he's constantly stating throughout this season that he can't really stay there because it would affect what would happen in the future. We see that Andrea now has taken up another company where she very much poses reference to William, who died in a previous episode. And we see both Alex and Kelly go away on their honeymoon with Esme as their daughter now. And I suppose in one sense the sincerity was there. It did have its heart in the right place. Like I said, there was an emotional tangibility in terms of the interaction with the characters. And one thing I would say about Supergirl is that this final arc did remind us that one of its biggest strengths was the heart, was the dynamic between the characters. And in terms of all the overall actors themselves, they performed very well. I've never had an issue with all of the actors throughout their roles. So the likes of Melissa Benoist, of course, Charlie Lee, David Harewood, Katie McGrath, of course, they all performed their roles very well throughout this season. So no faults in terms of the overall actors or their performances, but I just feel this was a finale that really was impacted by the season overall, and the fact that there were no real good ideas that were developed throughout. We had a very weak antagonist, and it had to try and wrap itself up the best way that it could. So we had the conclusive arc where essentially Kara, who has been struggling throughout to maintain her dual identity as Kara Danvers and Supergirl. Again, I question this because we've never referred to this throughout the entire season. Kara, for most part, has been battling to overcome Nxly. We've never had this established dynamic as to why she's struggling to get to grips with Supergirl. Not in this particular season. So I just felt it was a bit out of the blue that all of a sudden she wants to live her life freely and expose her identity to the world. So we get those final shots where we see Catco making a broadcast, and we see Cat Grant open up the news segment, and she's sitting across Kara as the newly announced Supergirl. So, and then the episode kind of ended, and it was really abrupt, and it was almost at this point that they were kind of running out of time and they had to wrap everything up. So it didn't quite have the effect or the weight that I felt they were really going for. I think overall they spent too much time on the wedding. We had the various songs and everybody dancing together, so it was well intended, but I felt it took away kind of the final moments of Kara. Now, many people, when I've seen the overall reaction to this in the build up to the finale, they felt that Kara was going to have a long standing departure, so she was going to kind of reunite Manal, and they were going to go to the 31st century. Now, I suppose that would have been a far more suitable outcome, because it would have given Kara a far more definitive arc. Just having her sit there, announce herself to the world, there was nothing definitive about it. There was nothing conclusive or significant about it. And I don't know if this was a way of the showrunners to kind of leave the door open just in case Melissa wanted to come back. She has stated in recent interviews that she would be willing to come back in some capacity for any future crossovers. So by closing it off in this regard, if she does indeed return, it's a much easier for them to just have her currently existing in the Arrowverse. They don't have to explain that Kara's just coming back and making a contribution to the team. Whereas if you have her depart to the future, when she comes back, you've got to explain where has she been, where has she come from, why is she now coming back. So maybe that was behind the thinking in terms of writing this finale. And also they've left it open if Melissa wants indeed to come back, or if they indeed want to revive the shows, which seems unlikely, but if indeed they do, it can be easy because you've got the characters already set within the universe. They agreed to establish the DEO as well, so all of the characters are in place. So if you did bring the show back for a limited run, some characters could go, some characters could stay, but Kara is still very established within National City, so it wouldn't be too much of an effort from a writing perspective to bring her back if you indeed wanted to revive the show. But I just felt it just lacked that real definitive edge, that real conclusion. You never got the feeling that we were really truly watching an overall season finale. So overall, to answer the original question, I don't think this provided the really worthy conclusion that I think was deserving of Kara Danvers. Overall, I think Supergirl as a show has been very good. It started off decent in its first season, and then it got more momentum in its second season. For me, the real peak of the show was the third season. That was near outstanding for the most part. It gave us a truly great villain in Reign. That was a villain that was built up very suspensefully and successfully throughout the entire show. And Reign proved to be not only one of the best villains of the overall show, Supergirl itself, but also one of the best villains in terms of the Arrowverse. And we had that probably one of the most spectacular and exciting episodes in the mid-season finale when she battled Reign and found herself completely battered and beaten. That was really the peak phase of the show overall. I think season 4 was very good when we had very good, complex and interesting antagonists in both Ben Lockwood and also Manchester Black. It dropped those villains halfway through and it concentrated on Lex overall with the Red Daughter dynamic, and I think that proved to be the detriment in that overall season. I think they should have maintained with the two previous villains. And as I mentioned, season 5 had some interesting ideas, but proved to be an overall weaker installment within the overall series. So I think it's been very good. I think Melissa Benoist has been very great in the role as Supergirl. And as I mentioned, a lot of the supporting cast and actors have been very good. I've looked pretty much all of them. I think David Harewood as John gave that overall very gravitas and statementship to the show. I've loved Charlie Lee as Alex Danvers. I've also loved Katie McGrath as Lena Luthor. And these are very strong and compelling female characters throughout the show. It's always tried to be more substantial and covered very important themes. So when we look at the likes of the alien immigration arc, there was a couple of episodes in season 3 when we talked about gun crime. Of course, it's focused very much on the LGBTQ representation with Alex, with her various relationships with Maggie, I believe her name was, in season 2, and then Kelly later on in season 5. We've touched on very much racial issues, and of course with the introduction of Naira's Dreamer when we had the first transgender character into the show. So whilst it's been accused of being woke, and I think some accusations have been justified, I believe it's been very good to have a show that's tried to have far more of a substantial meaning and concept throughout. So overall it's been a good show, but I just think in terms of this finale, it was a bit of a letdown. The first hour was very messy, as I mentioned before, but it kind of brought it home in the second half. But I just feel it had the heart, it had the soul, it had the chemistry, but it didn't quite have that real significant and definitive arc that I feel was fully worthy of the character itself. But who knows, maybe she will come back in some capacity, maybe in a limited run or in a future appearance within a crossover. Overall, I'll still say Supergirl has probably been one of the strongest series within the Arrowverse. It's definitely been better than Legends of Tomorrow. I think it's overall been stronger than Black Lightning, definitely Batwoman as well. The Flash, I think, probably on the same par, I would say, in terms of as strong a show as it is. So hopefully when we look at The Flash, it will maybe provide a bigger conclusion overall. But Supergirl, a very strong and charismatic lead in Melissa Benoist, a very good interpretation for the most part. Overall, it had more highs than lows. Season 3 was a highlight, but I just think this conclusion was a bit flawed and didn't really give the conclusion that was worthy of the character itself. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings on the concluding season of Supergirl, its 6th and final season. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think it was worthy enough? Do you think she really got the deserved concluding arc that she was worthy of? Or do you think a much better job could have been handled? Do you think this season finale is really hindered a lot by the overall season itself? What were the highs and the lows of this particular year? Let me know what you think in the comments as well. Please also hit the subscription and notification button so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay in safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.